Hello everyone, welcome back to Baji Rao IAS Academy, previous year's questions analysis. Now till yesterday we have discussed few questions with respect to India's relations with other countries as part of General Studies paper 2. Now in this session also we will try and understand few more questions which are particularly with respect to India's relations to other countries and also the interstate boundary disputes which are in news. Now, the first and foremost question in this session is about the line of actual control. So, the line of actual control is an undemarcated border between India and China. Now, so in recent times, India has been adopting aggressive posture towards as a response, as a reaction to China's assertiveness and aggression at the line of actual control, right? So in this context, first understand the line of actual control is actually a disputed region. Okay, so the line of actual control is an undemarcated boundary between India and China. So the areas which are marked here in red color, so they are disputed areas between India and China. So the LAC across India-China border has been further demarcated into three sectors. The first one is western sector, second one is central sector, and third is eastern sector. Okay, so in recent times there's a long-standing conflict between the forces of both China and India. So it is started with the Doklam conflict in the year 2017, and it is also marked by recent Galwan clashes in the year 2020. So therefore, in this context, China has further increased its assertiveness, aggression at the LAC. Now, as a reaction, India has also started adopting aggressive posture towards China. Now, in this context, we need to understand the backdrop of the LAC conflict. Now, the LAC conflict has a strained relationship between both India and China. So, however, this is part of a series of actions or series of assertive actions adopted by China. So, firstly, it is about the Doklam conflict and also Galwan clashes, and the Chinese forces ingress towards India's side. So, apart from this, there are several other, assertive actions from the Chinese side. So first and foremost, recently China renamed several places in Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, so there were different places. Even China claims Arunachal Pradesh as part of China. So in fact, Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India, but Arunachal Pradesh is claimed by China. So as part of this claim, recently China has renamed several places in Arunachal Pradesh. So even though India had strongly condemned the act of China renaming several places in Arunachal Pradesh. So apart from renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh, China has also denied visas to people or sports Indian media personnel. So it has also denied visas to Indian media personnel. So recently, it is also in news. Uh, Sports personnel from Arunachal Pradesh were also denied visas to participate in recent Asian Games. Now, after that, the presidential statement, the Russian's president's statement preparing for war. So, all these series of assertive actions have strained the relationship between India and China. Okay, so in this context, it is very important for India to prepare for any sort of eventuality. So therefore, India has been rapidly upgrading the border infrastructure. Apart from rapidly upgrading the border infrastructure, India has also been cooperating with the or aligning itself with the like-minded nations like Japan, USA. okay, in order to prepare for any eventualities. Now, what are the possible reasons for increased Chinese deployment at the line of actual control? Now, increased Chinese deployment of forces very often comes with increased assertiveness and aggressive postures over the line of actual control. Now, what are the reasons? What are the reasons which are driving Chinese deployment of forces to LAC? The first and foremost reason we need to understand is that India has been upgrading its border infrastructure, okay, as a reaction to Chinese assertiveness. So, the one such example of upgrading border infrastructure is recently India built Darbuk, Shok, and Daulat Oldie Road. Okay, so just remember this Darbuk, Shok, Daulat Beg, Oldie Road. Okay, now if you understand this Darbuk, Shok, and Oldie Beg Road has been constructed in near to LAC and near to the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Okay, so therefore China has concerns with respect to such infrastructure projects because it possibly derail their China-Pakistan economic corridor. So this is one such reason for increased deployment of forces across LAC. And the second major reason is in recent times, if you observe India's foreign policy, you can observe a major shift towards US. India's shift towards US. For example, the recent quadrilateral security dialogue. So, the increased tensions between US and China and India aligning itself with US has raised concerns in Beijing. So, the third major reason is China views India's assertions regarding the Gilgit-Baltistan. Okay, so recently India has revoked Article 370. So revoked special status to Article 370, and India has also been issuing statements with respect to Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Pakistan occupied Kashmir is very important for China because the China Pakistan economic corridor has been passing through Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And yesterday's class, we understood how China-Pakistan economic corridor is very important for China. So therefore, India's assertive moves in recent times about Gilgit-Baltistan is considered by China as an attack on China-Pakistan economic corridor. So this is considered as part of Belt and Road Initiative, and this is China's flagship program. So because the China-Pakistan economic corridor provides an alternative route for China to Indian Ocean and also to access to Central Asia or the Middle East. Okay, now the Chinese growing assertiveness over the South China Sea. Okay, in recent past, the assertiveness of China has been growing. For example, recently there was a conflict between Philippines Navy and Chinese naval forces, and after that, uh, there are concerns that COVID-19 pandemic uh, emerged in Wuhan, China. So therefore, there's a large-scale mortality in China due to COVID-19 pandemic. So in order to divert the domestic attention and in order to divert the economic tensions also, China has been deploying more and more forces to line of actual control. Okay, so these are the possible 5 reasons behind increased Chinese deployment at the line of actual control. Now, so what is the India's response? How India responded to Chinese moves? So first and foremost, we need to understand how India responded militarily. So India's response in terms of military response, India had moved additional divisions, tanks, and artillery. So across the line of actual control. So this is in response to Chinese deployment, so that we can counter Chinese illegal intrusions into our side. Next, so India had also responded economically. Now we very often hear about the ban on Chinese apps in India. So the one popular app of China is TikTok app. So this app was banned by government along with 59 other Chinese apps. So why these apps were banned? Because of emergent nature of threats. Threat to national security is a major reason for ban on Chinese apps in India. So after that, we need to understand the huge trade deficit between India and China. So there is around 54 billion US dollars of trade deficit. So highest trade deficit for India with any country. Okay. So therefore, in recent past, imports from China have also declined. So the major reason for declining imports from China, one is India's indigenization bid and India's programs like Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat. And apart from that, India has also been focusing on resilience, supply chain resilience, so that we could diversify our imports. We could not depend on one particular country such as China. Okay, so in this context, the imports or the trade deficit has been declined to $48 billion in the year 2019 and 20. So India has also focused on rapidly reducing the existing trade deficit with China. So, however, on the other hand, the tensions on the border as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, so they have thrown light on India's economic dependencies on China. Okay, for example, we have excessively dependent on China for active pharmaceutical ingredients. So we also dependent on China for automobiles and telecom products. So the COVID-19 pandemic exposed India's economic dependence on China. Now, after that, India still remains reliant on several Chinese products. For example, products which are critical and strategically very important. So, as we have discussed, India has dependent on China for rare earth metals, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and also telecom products and automobiles. Okay, so in order to curb this, uh, India had adopted the supply chain resilience initiative and also Make in India program. So, however, in 2020 April, while India was facing the COVID-19 pandemic, in order to prevent the predatory takeover of Indian companies by China. So why? Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the value of Indian companies had declined. So since the Indian companies have value declined, so there's an opportunity for Chinese investors to take over Indian companies at a much lower value. So in order to prevent the same, so India had imposed or India tightened FDI norms coming from countries with which India has been sharing land borders. Okay, so any sort of investment or any sort of such investment, government approval is mandatory, so that the government could prevent the predatory takeover of Indian companies which have been experiencing a crisis because of the COVID-19 pandemic and their value declined. So in this context, what were the recommendations made by the Parliamentary Standing Committee with respect to India-China, tensions? So what should be India's approach? Now, the Parliamentary Standing Committee had taken an aggressive posture with respect to China. So it had recommended that it had recognized and identified Indian Air Force's deterrent and striking capabilities. So it also held that these deterrent and striking capabilities of Indian Air Force are vital for any India-China conflict. So in case of India-China conflict, Air Force could play a very crucial role. And after that, the Parliamentary Standing Committee had also recommended that the government should consider buying state-of-the-art fifth generation fighter aircraft without losing time. Okay, so without much delay, the government should consider buying fifth generation fighter aircrafts so that we could be able to deal with China in a more aggressive manner. So we could have an upper hand. It is always held that when it comes to the combat, air force combat or air combat, India had an advantage with respect to China. So these advantages need to be further leveraged. And after that, the Parliamentary Standing Committee had also talked about a very slow production of Tejas fighter aircrafts. So, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited has not been able to supply enough Tejas fighter aircrafts for India or the Indian Air Force. So, in the context of China India dispute or the conflict, it is very important that these Tejas fighter aircraft should be delivered on a timely basis. And similar observations were also made by the Parliamentary Standing Committee with respect to hardware procurement of the Indian Navy and Indian Army. So, Indian Army and Indian Navy should also be prepared all the time to deal with any such conflict between India and China. Now, so we all know that India till now have two aircraft carriers, two aircraft carriers. So therefore, there were plans of procuring the third aircraft carrier as well. So, aircraft carrier is very often known as a moving base of a country. So, it plays a very important and a very crucial role, particularly in the context of India's aspirations for a blue water navy, because India has been aspiring to become a blue water navy, and also India is a net security provider in the region. So in this context, a third aircraft carrier for India is very important. So therefore, the Ministry of Defense should take a final call, should take a final decision with respect to acquiring or developing the third aircraft carrier, which is poised to enhance India's maritime capabilities. So this committee had also recommended allocation of around 3% of GDP to maintain India's different and aggressive posture. So defense expenditure should be around 3% of GDP. So when you are asked to write about the India-China conflict in way forward, you can write the recommendations of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, because these recommendations envision the further strengthening of Indian armed forces, particularly Indian Air Force and Indian Navy, to deal with any eventuality that could arise from India-China conflict. This is all about this question. And the next question is with respect to regional comprehensive economic partnership. Okay, so this regional comprehensive economic partnership is a, a trade bloc. Okay, so this is a trade bloc between 10 Asian countries. So we all know that Asian has 10 member countries. So a trade bloc between 10 Asian countries plus 6 countries which are part of Asia Pacific. So what are those countries? They include Australia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and New Zealand. So in this particular context, the question has been asking, the regional comprehensive economic partnership is actually a way to bolster trading ties among nations across Asia Pacific. We need to elaborate this answer. Now, first and foremost, please understand what are the member countries of the regional comprehensive economic partnership. So you can see here, these are the member countries of regional comprehensive economic partnership. So earlier, India was also part of the regional comprehensive economic partnership negotiations. Okay, negotiations. So, however, due to certain domestic concerns, India, later withdrawn from the negotiations of the regional comprehensive partnership. So now India is not on board of RCEP. So you can go through all the countries which are part of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. So they include Australia, Brunei, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Japan, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, New Zealand, Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. Okay, so easy way to remember is just 10 Asian countries plus 6 countries which are in Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific region. Now, what is a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership? So, this Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is an economic agreement. Okay, so this is an economic agreement between Asian member countries and free trade agreement partners. So the countries with which ASEAN had free trade agreement. Okay, so this is overall an economic agreement, and you have to understand that Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership is world's largest. So it is the largest trading bloc. So this has been designed to promote economic integration between member countries, trade liberalization, and also cooperation among the member nations. Okay, so this is what is the overall objective of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, if you go to the history of Regional Comprehensive Partnership, so the negotiations were started in the year 2012. Okay, so when the negotiations were started in 2012, but officially it was signed in the year 2020 November. Okay, now this trade Regional Comprehensive Economic Agreement has entered into force in January 2022. Okay, so this is the background, a brief background about the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. However, we need to understand what are the areas which are covered as part of RCEP. So it includes trade in goods, trade in services, investment, economic and technical cooperation, intellectual property, competition, dispute settlement, e-commerce, small and medium enterprises, and other issues. Virtually all the issues which are related to trade and commerce are part of the RCEP negotiation processes. Now, in this context, what are the objectives of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership? The RCEP facilitate trade and investment among member nations. So, no doubt about this, it of course facilitate trade and investment among the member nations. Secondly, RCEP reduces or eliminates tariffs and non-tariff barriers to trade. So, there are certain tariffs, for example, few countries increase higher tariffs in order to protect their domestic industries, and also ensure that the dumping of the foreign subsidized goods uh, will not be dumped into the other countries. So there are also certain non-tariff barriers like sanitary measures, phytosanitary measures. So RCEP will reduce or eliminate these tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers. So RCEP will also enhance economic cooperation and will also strengthen the regional supply chains. So strengthening regional supply chains will ensure diversification of supply chains. So these countries no need to depend on one particular country. So what are the benefits of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership? Now it promotes economic growth and regional stability. Obviously, it promotes economic growth. So, and when economic prosperity has been there in any country, that would also result in regional stability. It would also further streamline trade procedures and regulation. Apart from this, the other objective of RCEP include it encourages foreign investment in those countries. It will also enhance competitiveness and innovation. Now, in terms of trade volume, uh, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership member nations represent around 30% of the global gross domestic product. Okay, so they represent around 30% of the global gross domestic product. Okay. Now, The trading bloc. So because of this reason, it is known to represent, it is known as the largest trading bloc in the world. So the trading blocks covers around one third of the global population. Okay, so it covers around one third of the global population, and it also has the potential to significantly impact the global trade. So what is the regional comprehensive economic partnerships role in global trade? Now, the regional comprehensive economic partnership strengthens the influence of the Asia Pacific region in the international trade. Of course, when trade is strengthened, and it has resulted in more and more prosperity, and it has strengthened the existing supply chains in a particular region, then that could further enhance influence of the Asia Pacific region in the international trade. So this agreement can also serve as a model for future trade deals and regional cooperation. Okay. Now, this is the role of regional comprehensive economic partnership in the global trade. So overall, now all these factors, you know, how it influences, how it strengthens the Asia Pacific trade in the particular region, because all the major countries which are in the region are part of the regional comprehensive economic partnership, except India, because India had some reservations with respect to RCEP. So we have discussed that RCEP negotiations were started in 2012. It was signed in 2020. However, in the year 2019, so India decided to withdraw from the RCEP negotiations. So earlier, India was the founding member of RCEP, but India decided to withdraw from the RCEP negotiations just before 1 year of concluding RCEP. So India's decision to exit from RCEP was actually based on concerns about the impact on domestic economy. So how RCEP impacts the domestic economy? It is virtually the free trade agreement between these countries. So China had a huge advantage among all these countries. So there is a possibility that China could flood its goods. China could flood its cheap goods into other countries. So thereby distorting the domestic markets in these countries. Okay, so this is the primary concern of India. Okay, so this included the fear of influx of Chinese goods into the Indian market. So when the Chinese goods are dumped into the Indian market, it obviously impact or affect the local industries. Now, what are the issues which are the issues related to mobility in services and reservations on agricultural sector and small businesses are contributing factors for India's exit to regional comprehensive partnership agreement. Now, for India, mobility in services is very important and very crucial, but other countries were not in agreement with India with respect to mobility in services. And India also had a reservations with respect to agriculture sector, because a very sensitive sector for India. And therefore, in this context, India opted out of regional comprehensive economic partnership, even though the RCEP countries provided another window of opportunity for India to be part of RCEP. Okay, so this is all about the regional comprehensive economic partnership and how this could strengthen the trade, so the intra-regional trade within the Asia Pacific region and India's concerns. So the next question is with respect to the interstate borders. So there are different interstate borders interstate border disputes. Recently, we have seen the interstate border dispute between Karnataka and Maharashtra over Belgavi. So therefore, this is very crucial and very important issue. So the question which is asking here is that, keeping in view of the recent interstate disputes between few Indian states, okay, so there is a clarion call for vigorous institutional mechanisms. Okay, so in particular, when it comes to the interstate uh, border disputes, there's a need for a vigorous institutional mechanism so that we could prevent such border disputes. So please understand the border disputes or the boundary disputes between different states have been given here. Okay, so first and foremost, the border dispute between Karnataka and Maharashtra. So, okay, this border dispute is about the Marathi speaking border areas, as well as Belgaum in Karnataka. So, this border dispute is between. And secondly, there's a border dispute between Karnataka and Kerala also. This is with respect to Kasaragod district of Kerala. And after that, a dispute between Odisha and Andhra Pradesh with respect to 63 villages. Okay, so the dispute is with respect to jurisdiction over these 63 villages between Andhra. So see, all these all these which are given here, you can mention them as examples whenever you write points. So you can write them as examples. So whether it is Odisha Chhattisgarh dispute, Odisha Jharkhand dispute, and Odisha West Bengal dispute. So all these disputes you can write. And the one major thing we need to note here is that there are violent clashes and conflicts between the northeastern states with respect to these interstate border issues. Okay, whether it is with respect to Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, Assam and Nagaland, Assam and Mizoram. Okay, now we need to understand what are the causes, what is the genesis of such disputes in India. First and foremost, the linguistic assertion of these regions or different states. As we already have some basic knowledge that uh, several states in India were formed based on the linguistic, on the linguistic basis. They formed on the linguistic basis. So therefore, several the interstate disputes have their roots in the reorganization of states in the year 1950 itself. So it was primarily based on language. Okay, so as we have discussed, the Karnataka and Maharashtra interstate dispute is also has its genesis or roots over the linguistic basis or the linguistic dispute. And secondly, the colonial divisions. The colonial divisions are often identified as unscientific divisions. Okay, also between different ethnic communities over the particular region. So it is often categorized as a unscientific division. So many state demarcations were based on the district boundaries. They were created by British. So as an example, you can write about partition of Bengal led to present day Assam issue. And secondly, inequitable sharing of resources between these states is also a cause of concern. So these territorial contests are part of larger set of differences over resources between states. Okay, and also there is a lack of constitutional mechanism between these states. Okay, these states. For example, Article 262. So Article 262 provides for the establishment of interstate river disputes tribunal. Okay, so it has provided Parliament to create an interstate river water disputes tribunal. So Article 262 on the adjudication of disputes relating to interstate river waters or river valleys. So there is no comparable provision on the dispute on land. Okay, so a provision has been created to resolve disputes, water disputes, river valley disputes, but there is no provision in the constitution in order to uh, you know prevent any dispute between these countries. So after that, political opportunism is also another factor because over the years there's no serious effort. Okay, over the years there's no serious efforts have been made to resolve these disputes. So since there were no serious efforts, political parties have used this as a vote bank politics. So they use this to mobilize voters on narrow political lines. So this factor has been used as a political used for political opportunism. Now, need for vigorous institutional mechanism, and this is the key demand of the question. So, what exactly is the need for a vigorous institutional mechanism? So, first and foremost, the zonal councils. So, even though the zonal councils have no constitutional status, so they have the desired capacity to deal with these interstate boundary disputes. For example, the State Reorganization Act 1956, it sets up an institutional mechanism to settle the disputes. Okay, so it already set the institutional mechanism to resolve any such disputes. So it had set up of 5 zonal councils in different regions. Okay, so these zonal council constitute ministers and chief ministers. So they sit together and resolve those issues. Secondly, dialogue would be a very crucial means to resolve the disputes between these states. Okay, so even center could play a very crucial role as a mediator to resolve disputes and the reconciliation between these states. So therefore, dialogue and political settlements are very important. So central commissions. The Sundaram Commission recommended a border between Assam and Nagaland. So, but Nagaland rejected this report. Okay. So, Sundaram Committee had also been appointed to resolve dispute between Assam and Nagaland, but Nagaland ultimately rejected the report. Now, apart from that, judicial intervention could also play a very crucial role in settling these disputes. So, however, the problem with the judicial intervention is that these judgments or the awards are often delayed. Okay, so because of this reason, judicial intervention is not considered as an appropriate method to settle these disputes. However, zonal councils and the political dialogue between different parties which are involved in the dispute, and apart from that, Article 263 should also be considered. So, Article 263 provided for the interstate council. So interstate council will also will help in resolving disputes, okay, in an amicable manner. So apart from Article 263 and the zonal councils, so we also have several other arrangements. So that could be used to resolve the interstate disputes. Okay, so zonal councils and Article 263 and dialogue. So are the better ways of or the institutional mechanisms to resolve these disputes. So the next question is with respect to inclusivity and cooperation for a common good will be the core of India's mission to its president of G20. Now recently India hosted India had become the president of G20 summit. So India successfully conducted the G20 summit as well. So in this context, inclusivity and cooperation for common good will be the core of India's mission as a president of G20 grouping. So in this context, we need to understand, so what are the member countries of G20 grouping? So the member countries include Canada, so all the G7 members, so please remember all the G7 members, and apart from G7, so earlier G7 used to be known as G8 grouping, but after Russia's annexation of Crimea, Russia was expelled from G8 grouping, later it became G7. So the remaining countries, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, China, European Union, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, South Korea, and Turkey are part of the G20 grouping. So recently, African Union was also become part of the G20 group. Now, the 18th G20 summit, this was held in New Delhi, India. So this was held from September 9th to 10th, 2023. So this summit was first time India hosted. Okay, so this is the first time India hosted the G20 summit. So the theme of the G20 summit is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Please remember, this is very important. So you may get this in your prelims examination and state PSC examination. So what's the theme of the G20 summit? It is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So what's the meaning of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam? So the entire world is one family is the theme of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Now the G20 leaders have come up with a New Delhi declaration. So the New Delhi declaration indicates there's an anonymity on several issues. So in earlier summit at Indonesia, that was Bali Declaration. So such anonymity was not achieved, but New Delhi Declaration achieved anonymity on several issues or anonymous consensus on several global issues. For example, the Russia-Ukraine tensions and sustainable development goals, food security, and launching global biofuel alliance. So in all these issues, an anonymous consensus has been achieved. Now, what are the major outcomes of the G20 Summit 2023? So, the major outcomes which indicate cooperation and inclusivity on the part of India or at the center of India's presidency to G20 Summit, first and foremost is that admittance of African Union. Okay, so now see, this indicates the inclusivity. So all other parties which are otherwise not represented should be part of the G20 grouping. So admittance of African Union. Now the G20 leaders or all the leaders agreed to admit African Union as a permanent member of G20. So this is considered as one of the major steps to ensure inclusivity of the grouping. Now this is India's initiative to include African Union as part of the G20, and now it has become G21. So this particular move will ensure inclusivity and representation to developing countries which are otherwise not given representation in the G20 grouping. So this is in line with India's leadership as India's leadership role in global south. Secondly, India also stayed fast. India also launched the Global Biofuel Alliance. So this is to achieve the climate targets of all other countries in cooperation, in partnership. Okay, so the Global Biofuel Alliance is India-led initiative. Okay, so this GBA, the Global Biofuel Alliance, it aims to develop an alliance between governments, international organizations, and industry. So to promote biofuel production, and this will not just benefit the entire world, but in particular, this will help accelerate India's biofuel programs, the existing biofuel programs. For example, Prime Minister Jaivan Yojana, Satat, and Govardhan. So these programs are launched to ensure or to strengthen India's existing biofuel programs. So the third, it is launched India, Middle East, and Europe Economic Corridor to fund further strengthen cooperation among trade, commerce, connectivity. Okay, so this is India, Middle East Economic Corridor. So a memorandum of understanding was signed between governments of India, US, Saudi Arabia, European Union, UAE, France, Germany, and Italy to establish India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. The India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor is actually part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment. Now, the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment is led by US, and it is an initiative of G7 countries. Now, the G7 countries, earlier we had understood what are those G7 countries. Now, this G7 countries launched Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment as an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. So, unlike China's Belt and Road Initiative, the infrastructure projects which are developed as part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, so they are more sustainable in nature. Okay, so they are more sustainable in nature, and the debt is also sustainable, unlike China's Belt and Road Initiative, which very often leads to the debt trap among those countries. So this ensures infrastructure development in the developing projects in combination with both public and private investments. So after that, tripling global renewable energy capacity by 2030. So these countries, so India had also initiated to further increase renewable energy generation capacity. So G20 countries promised to work towards tripling the global renewable energy capacity by 2030, so that the climate goals, the climate ambitions could be met so as quickly as possible. So after that, these countries were also committed to global food security and nutrition. Okay, so the G20 leaders recognized the importance of addressing the rising commodity prices, rising food and energy prices, so and contribute to or contribution of low pressure, cost of living, so low cost of living. And apart from that, so they committed to eliminate hunger and malnutrition. So they have also acknowledged the challenges to poverty, climate change, pandemics, and conflicts, and disproportionately affecting vulnerable populations, and particularly women and children. So, therefore, all these initiatives which are launched by India, so they are indicating that the inclusivity, equity, and also cooperation are at the core of India's G7, G20 leadership. So this is how you have to write this answer, and ultimately in the conclusion that India successfully conducted, India successfully led its role as a president to G20 summit, 18th G20 summit. So the core of India's G20 leadership is equity, inclusivity, cooperation, and multilateralism. Okay, so that is being reflected in the the consensus which is being achieved in the Delhi Declaration. Okay, so this is all for today, and in the next lecture also we will discuss few more questions. So please subscribe and hit the like icon.